Have you ever wondered if Newton was truly the first to articulate the laws of motion? Or could someone have beaten him to the punch? A fascinating question, isn't it? This historical conundrum takes us back centuries to the ancient Indian philosopher Rishi Kanada, known for his seminal work, the Vaisheshika Sutras. Now, you might be wondering, who exactly was Rishi Kanada? A philosopher and scientist of the ancient world, Kanada was a figure who made significant strides in understanding the fundamental principles of the universe. His work, the Vaisheshika Sutras, is considered a cornerstone of Indian philosophical thought, with discussions on subjects ranging from metaphysics to the nature of reality. Here's where the plot thickens. Some scholars argue that within the dense text of the Vaisheshika Sutras, Kanada hints at concepts eerily similar to what we now know as Newton's laws of motion. If this is true, could it be possible that Kanada conceptualized the laws of motion centuries before Newton? However, it's important to note that these are not universally accepted claims. There's a significant debate surrounding this theory, with critics questioning the interpretation of Kanada's sutras and whether they truly align with Newton's laws. It's a complex puzzle, isn't it? On the one hand, we have the long-standing belief that Newton was the pioneer of these groundbreaking laws of motion. On the other hand, we have a compelling argument suggesting that an ancient philosopher might have beaten Newton to the punch. So where does that leave us? Well, it sparks a fascinating exploration of history, philosophy, and science as we unravel the origins of these fundamental laws that govern our universe. But before we jump to conclusions, it's crucial to delve deeper into the evidence supporting this claim. After all, in the world of science and history, it's evidence that tips the scales. Let's embark on this journey together as we unravel the historical conundrum surrounding the origins of Newton's laws of motion. To understand the role Rishi Kanada might have played in the formulation of the laws of motion, we need to journey back to ancient India. Kanada, an esteemed philosopher of his time, was the founder of the Vaisheshika school of philosophy that significantly discussed the concepts of motion and force. In the Vaisheshika Sutras, Kanada propounds the concept of veg, which resonates with the idea of motion. He categorizes motion into 5 types: upward, downward, contraction, expansion, and locomotion. This categorization implies a profound understanding of the dynamics of movement, which was truly ahead of its time. In a similar vein, Kanada's concept of gurutva, or gravity, echoes Newton's law of universal gravitation. Gurutva, according to Kanada, is the characteristic of an object that leads to a downward motion, unless countered by an opposing force. This idea seems to mirror Newton's first law of motion, which asserts that an object will remain at rest or in uniform motion in a straight line unless acted upon by an external force. Moreover, Kanada's atomic theory, where he postulates that everything in the universe is composed of parmanu or atoms, hints at a fundamental understanding of the nature of matter. This, in turn, could have implications for the understanding of force and motion, as these concepts are intrinsically linked to the properties of matter. So, did Kanada's philosophical ideas make their way to Newton, influencing his formulation of the laws of motion? There's certainly evidence to suggest that the ancient Indian philosopher was grappling with concepts related to motion and force long before Newton, and while there's no definitive proof of a direct link between the two, it's an intriguing possibility that merits further exploration. From this perspective, it seems plausible that Newton might not have been the first to formulate the laws of motion. But let's not be hasty. There's more to this story, and in our next segment, we'll explore the Western perspective on the origins of Newton's laws. Now let's shift our focus to the scientific revolution in 17th century Europe, where Newton made his mark. This era was a period of radical change, a melting pot of new ideas and discoveries, redefining how we understood the natural world. It was a time when thinkers began to question established beliefs and instead turned to empirical observation, experimentation, and mathematical analysis. The scientific method was gaining traction, and it was against this backdrop that Newton formulated his laws of motion. Newton's first law, known as the law of inertia, states that an object at rest stays at rest, and an object in motion stays in motion, with the same speed and in the same direction, unless acted upon by an unbalanced force. The second law established the relationship between an object's mass, its acceleration, and the amount of force it experiences. The third law declared that for every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. These laws were a synthesis of observation and mathematical analysis. Newton observed the world around him, noted the patterns, and then used mathematics to describe and predict these patterns. He didn't just pull these laws out of thin air. They were the product of meticulous observation, rigorous experimentation, and mathematical precision. It's also worth noting that Newton's work was built upon the foundations laid by his predecessors. Ideas about motion and force had been floating around for centuries, but it was Newton who consolidated them into laws, providing a comprehensive framework for understanding the physical world. So, considering all this, it appears that Newton's laws might indeed have been a product of his own era. They emerged from a unique confluence of intellectual curiosity, methodical observation, and mathematical innovation. But as we've seen, the story of Newton's laws is a complex one, woven with threads of influence and innovation from both East and West. But the final verdict is yours to make. As we peel back the layers of history, we invite you to reflect, question, and decide for yourself. Where do you think the origins of Newton's laws truly lie? Having presented both sides of the argument, it's now up to you to draw your own conclusions. We've journeyed through the ancient philosophy of Rishi Kanada, whose Vaisheshika sutras may have hinted at concepts of motion and force. Then we ventured into 17th century Europe, where Newton's laws of motion emerged amid a scientific revolution, grounded in empirical observation, experimentation, and mathematical analysis. The question remains, did the ideas of an ancient Indian philosopher influence the laws that Newton would formulate? Or were these laws born solely from the scientific context of Newton's time? These contrasting viewpoints showcase the complexity and richness of scientific history. As we continue to explore the fascinating evolution of scientific thought, remember the importance of critical thinking and skepticism. Don't accept historical claims at face value. Delve deeper, question further, and form your own informed opinions. The final verdict is always yours to make.